Welcome to Home Tiny Lab. My name is Christoph. We will create a virtual machine only using the CLI management tool. I will put all what I'm using in the description of links or references, and I will also make chapters so that you can easily go around in the video if there is something that you want to review, or if there is a part of the video that you are only interested in. There are different management solutions for the Xen Hypervisor. So for local management, you have the XCLI, the XOLite, Xen API, and XCP-ng Center. And today we are going to use XCLI for management at scale and also for local management. The easiest way to do your management is Xen Orchestra Web UI. They go really good together. For using the XCLI, you have to log in into your XCP-ng Hypervisor directly. You can also do it from the console if you have a keyboard and screen directly connected to your Hypervisor server. I am using an SSH connection. With this you can execute XC commands, and one of the XC commands is help, so that it gives you a list, but we will discuss this further on. So let's clear this. If you are at a console, you will see this. This is a screen that you will have. Then you will have to go to the local command shell to get into a shell session so that you can execute XC commands. So let's quit this and let's clear. Here you have an example of how XOLite will resemble in. This is only a project for the moment. It's still in development, but it will soon become one of the systems to manage locally your hypervisor. What will be for a lot of the home labbers a good solution. And then another tool for local management is a Windows client, the XCP-ng Center, not officially supported, but it still works and still is a good solution for a home lab that is not exhaustive, where you only have little things to manage. But it has not all the features that Xen Orchestra has. If you want to know more about Xen Orchestra, I have an video list where I use Xen Orchestra to do several tasks like backup, memory management, and other things. It's very interesting if you are not used to or not acquainted to use Xen Orchestra. So have a look at that if you are interested. To be clear, this is the preferred stack to use the XCP-ng hypervisors. So you have your Orchestra, so your single server, or your multiple servers. On each server you have XCP-ng installed with the Xen hypervisor. And then you have Xen Orchestra, in fact, above all your XCP-ng instances to manage them at scale. Even with one system, I think it has some extraordinary value to manage your virtual machines. Here we are going to replace Xen Orchestra by XCLI to manage our stack. In the documentation of XCP-ng, there is a section XCLI, and that's a good starting point to get acquainted with the different build-up of the XC commands. So the syntax is always XC command and the arguments that follow. And you can combine that with other Linux commands to filter out the information that you are looking for. So this is a good base to start from. Here I am logged in into my Xen hypervisor, and I can start executing commands from here. One is XC help that I have already demonstrated in the beginning. And you see a short list of commands that you can use with XZ. But there is much more. For instance, if you use the argument XC help whole, it will show a more exhaustive list of commands that are possible. So if you scroll up, you will see a lot of instructions possible. So for the sake of this tutorial, we are going to create a virtual machine which will give us a basic knowledge of how we can use XZ command to do some basic stuff in the hypervisor. So let's start. For example, when we are creating a virtual machine, the first thing that we need is the template that we want to use. So now we are going to look for the template. So this is the command to list the templates that are existing for your hypervisor. And because I want to use a Rocky template to install my virtual machine with, I am selecting only the templates that start with Rocky, with the grep Linux command. So if I press enter now, I will see one or multiple templates that are present. In this case, I see two templates, one for Rocky Linux 8 and one for Rocky Linux 9. And I am going to install a Rocky Linux 9. Here we see the instruction to install a virtual machine or to create more the virtual machine. It's not installed yet. So it's xevm install and then template, the template that we have found with template list, Rocky Linux 9. And we will give a name to the virtual machine, CLI virtual machine. So let's press enter. And now we see that the virtual machine is created, and something that's a lot used in Xen. Everything is linked to a unique identifier. And we call the unique identifier the uuid. Because we are going to use a lot the unique identifiers, I am going to export this virtual machine UUID that I'm going to use to continue creating and configuring the virtual machine. I will store this in a variable called virtual machine underscore UUID. And I will consistently use this syntax for the variables that I am going to create, so that I can find them back easily. And otherwise you will always have to research for this UUID and type them completely if you don't do this. So press enter, and now the variable is stored. So to check this, if you want to see the content of a variable, you have to begin with $ and then VM underscore UUID. And this will show the content. So you know that you can use this in your commands. To install the virtual machine, we will need an ISO, and we need a place where we can get access to our ISO. So here I am going to make a local storage resource of the type ISO. To do this, I will have to make a folder or a directory where I can store my ISOs. Command to make your directory structure, and I say directory structure, is make dir -p. With -p you will also create all the directories that does not exist. So like Xen does not exist, then ISO underscore store is the place where I want to put my ISOs. So with this command, the complete structure will be created. So I'm going to press enter, and to check this, I'm going to that folder. So I am already in opt. So if I do Xen, Xen is there. ISO store is also there. So I am in the folder ISO underscore store for the moment. Now I need to create my ISO storage. To create the ISO storage, you have to use storage resource create. Then you have to point to the host user ID. Then you have to have the name label local ISO, type ISO, the device configuration location, so the folder where it will be in. Then we will set legacy mode true, and the type, content type, is ISO. But there is something that we didn't do for the moment, that's creating the host UUID. We don't have the value of this, so that is something that we have now to look for. To find the host of our hypervisor, the UUID, you can use exe host list. So let's type enter. Because I only have one hypervisor, it's rather simple. This is the unique identifier of my XCP-ng host. So let's store this now in a variable. This is the command to store this in the host underscore UUID variable. Enter, and this is stored. So now I can execute the storage resource create command. So I have the host UID. The name label is going to be local ISO, but I'm going to simplify this. I am going to put local ISO. It's enough. We know that this is a storage resource. Type ISO, device config the location, legacy mode true, content type ISO. So let's do enter, and then the resource will be created. Now the storage resource unique identifier is displayed, and this we also have to store in a variable. So this is the command to store the unique identifier in the variable sr_iso_unique identifier. So press enter, and this is done. The next step that we need to do is to download the ISO of the operating system that we want to install on our virtual machine. To get the ISO to our local hypervisor or local ISO storage, we use the wget command, and we go to HTTPS and the place on the web where our ISO can be found. So this is something that you will have to look up to know at which location your ISOs are that you want to use to install virtual machines with. Let's press enter, and the downloading starts. This will take up about 5 minutes, and then we will continue. Okay, now that the downloading is finished, we have to scan the source storage type ISO that we have named local ISOs or local ISO. So the command for this is the command xzsr scan, and then the UID of the resource you want to scan. So enter. The scanning is already done. This is something, now we have done this on a local ISO storage, but you can also do this on a shared storage. And I will show this immediately because I have shared storages for this hypervisor already defined, and I will put the command to make this with an example of the command in the description. So with xzsr list of type ISO, it will list all the storages that I have already defined. So here, for instance, you have the virtual machine ISO, and here you have the local ISO and the ISO for the guest tools if you have to install them. So let's clear this. With this command, we can see what's in the ISO listed as ISOs that we have already downloaded. So I will press enter, and we see 2 ISOs that are already in some storage resource of type ISO. So this one is on my shared resource, and this is the one that we have downloaded locally. And I want to obtain this one, so I will export this one in a variable to use later on. So this way I am going to put this ISO in cd_ISO variable and enter. So now we need also to know for further configuration which disk is assigned to our virtual machine with the template. And we are looking for a VDI unique identifier. So let's press enter. And now in the list we see that there is a VDI that corresponds with our virtual machine that we want to create. And this we will store in the virtual machine disk unique identifier. This is the command that we will use to do this. Enter. And now the next thing that we will do is configuring the virtual machine. So with all what we have collected as information, we can almost start putting some parameters at our virtual machine. So what we are doing is adapting the values of the template. So let's get started. With this command, we are going to attach the installation media to our virtual machine. So let's press enter. So this is done. With this command, we are going to make our installation media the boot device. So let's press enter. With the next part, we are going to create a network interface for a virtual machine. So we will bind it to a physical network interface. So let's press enter to see to which interface we can bind it to. Enter. And here we have an all list. And the one that's where I'm interested in, I know that my ETH0, my physical network port that's connected to my local area network. So I will link the network to this unique identifier. So I'm going to copy this. So I have the next command to link my virtual interface. So to create a virtual interface for my virtual machine to the network unique identifier ID, so ATH0. So let's press enter. And now I have the unique identifier of the virtual interface. That's presented to me. The next step is to configure the memory for the virtual machine. Clear this. The command to configure the virtual machine memory limits are the following: dynamic maximum, dynamic minimum, static maximum, and static minimum. And I have a video that I will link in the description, and I will put a pointer in the video where I explain those settings. But in short, the memory that will be used by the virtual machine will be 2 GB. So dynamic max and dynamic minimum will make it that it will always have 2 GB as memory. So let's type enter, and this is done. The next thing that I want to do is resizing the virtual disk for my virtual machine. So I have stored the VDI, unique identifier of the virtual machine, here, and now I'm going to resize the VDI, and the disk size for the template was 10 GB. I am changing it to 20 GB, and now with enter, this is done. With the next command, we are going to start up our virtual machine. With all the settings that we have done, we are ready to do this. So when I'm going to press enter, it will start up the virtual machine. So enter, it's starting up the virtual machine, and now the virtual machine is started up and booting from the ISO. Our problem is that we cannot access the console of it because we are in CLI mode. So let's look now at how we can connect to the virtual machine. The first thing that we need is to know the number of the VNC console where we want to connect to. With this command, it will list and show us the line that corresponds with our virtual machine. So here we have what corresponds with our virtual machine. This is the unique identifier of the virtual machine, and this is the VLC port that we want to use. To make it possible to bind to the VNC socket, we will use a utility called socat, and it has to be installed. On my system it's already present, but this is the command to install it. So I will press enter, and it will say that it's already installed. Now this is the command to bind a port, the 9000 port, that will listen and connect to the virtual VNC port. So if we execute this, it stays open in this session. And now we have to go to your workstation where you're working from. In my case, it's a Windows workstation. To connect to the console, you need to make an SSH tunnel to your port where your hypervisor is listening on. So I am using a Putty to make my connection, and I am connecting to my XCP Home Tiny Lab. And when you go a little bit further in the configuration, you have tunnels. So you have connection, SSH, and tunnels. And there I have defined my local port 9000 to the IP address of my hypervisor and connecting to port 9000 also thereon. So I have to open this session, so I'm clicking on open, and then I have to log in. So with the root account always. Once you're logged in, your connection and your tunnel is set up. So let's close this. Not close it, minimize it, because if you are closing it, you're losing your tunnel connection. Now I'm going to my VNC client. This is the VNC client that I'm using. And here you see that I've already used it. I have already made a connection localhost 9000. Let's reuse this. And when you're done with it, this is the installation screen of Rocky Linux 9. So I'm not going through all the installation in this video. So I'm going to install this, and then I'll be back to finish the complete setup of the virtual machine. Okay, the installation is done. Now I have to reboot the virtual machine. To do this, here normally is a button reboot. In my language, that's what you will see. So clicking on it, and the system is rebooting normally. Okay, so now that the system is rebooted, I've lost the connection with the port because the virtual machine is went down, so the tunnel is broken now. So now we have to wait until the machine is booted up again. And then we can do the last thing, that's installing the guest tools for the hypervisor. So these are the commands to change to the guest tools ISO. So first you have to eject your installation ISO, and then you have to insert the guest tools. Now we have to go back to the console of the virtual machine. We can list here now to which port we have to connect to. It's 5. Now we have to execute the socat command to make a port that listens to the VNC 5. Enter. Session is open. Now we can return to VNC and reconnect with the virtual machine. So here we are reconnected with the virtual machine console. And here we can now mount the guest utilities with. So once we are connected to the console again, we have to use mount dev cd-rom and directory where we want to mount on the ISO, and now press enter. It's only in write protected mode, and now we can execute the command to install the guest utilities or guest tools. This is the command to install the guest tools, and enter. Yes, we want to continue. Installation is in progress, and now after this is installed, we need to reboot. So let's type reboot. System shutting down and will restart. And my connection now is closed with the port on my hypervisor. With this command, we can now see if the guest tools are installed, and we can now get some more information from our virtual machine. The virtual machine is now booted up completely. I'm going to execute the same command to interrogate my virtual machine. And now I have for networks, for instance, the IP address that is shown. Now I could connect with SSH to this virtual machine. So let's try this from our hypervisor, SSH. I'm going to do this as I've created a user when I install the machine, and I'm going to paste this and enter. Okay, yes, the password, and I'm logged into the virtual machine that I just have created using XCLI. Now the point is proven. I think that it's better to use Xen Orchestra. I hope that this was very useful to a lot of home labbers out there, and that you can easily be assured that Xen Orchestra is a good way to go, even to start in using an hypervisor and to go into virtualization. I hope to see you in the next video, and if it was very useful, please give it a thumbs up and watch my other videos on my channel. Bye!